Well, America's at war again. If we ever made it out of war in the Middle East, not sure if that ended or not. We're so far not at war with American forces, but we are funding it. And funding it and arming it is at war, especially when you go as far as to brag about it. I mean, if it was a secretive CIA thing where this is a target we need to take out, a confrontation we must have, it seems like it would be funded. You could fund it and not tell everybody about it. So it seems that there's intentionally a plan to escalate it. Otherwise, we wouldn't be making it clear throughout the world that America is at war with Russia in the Ukraine. One good thing that's perhaps an improvement over recent past American wars is that there wasn't a fake attack upon America to get this started. So without Americans agreeing to it, we have begun funding this war with billions of dollars of American taxpayers' money without American taxpayers having any say in that having happened. But at least there wasn't, say, a bomb set off in America that we accused Russia of doing to have the excuse to do it. So for better or worse, now it's been made clear that the American government, at least under this current administration, will just do as it pleases. Now, there's a thing that could be said. A lot of that, I'd have to say, is that Biden does make Trump look good in a lot of ways. So good, perhaps, that it almost seems as if his role was intentionally to do that, to just make Trump look good. Because this whole globalization push has really caught fire and took root and began to be a real thing. For the first time in history, the world was under one global rule. Most of it, that is. And at least America was part of the countries that was under the rule of other nations through the World Health Organization. Sure, Fauci backed it with the CDC, but the ruling was coming down from the World Health Organization, a branch of the UN. So, with that having taken place, America fell into this rule. It should be realized while Trump was president. I don't feel that was necessarily his plan, but he was either conned or overwhelmed, but it did happen under his rule. So, to make him look good in the light of that, we've seen even worse things happen under Biden, and who totally backed up the things that Trump was doing wrong. Even more so, taking it more drastic. The freedoms that America gave up under Trump, who did squawk a little bit about the fact that those freedoms were being taken after he'd handed over the power to the CDC to do so. With Biden, it was more the people had to put up a squawk to try and get some of those freedoms back with mask mandates and the travel blocks and all the rulings that happened under the global pandemic, COVID. So, what can we say? If we're going to have global rule, could that be a good thing or a bad thing? Well, it's good if you're a nation that's going to become more free. Say if you're a nation that's lived under tyranny for centuries, and all of a sudden you become part of a free society, that's a wonderful thing. But for America, so far, the global thing, as we saw with the pandemic, the global ruling internationally has shown that it is going to be more constrictive than what we're used to as Americans. So there's reasons to oppose it, at least given this limited example of what it's going to be like. Now, if we're going to remain separate nations but have rules that govern all nations equally, I think that the UN would do well to adopt some of the rules of the NFL. which would require we change some terms. National borders, for example, would be called the lines of scrimmage. And we would have to change what we call the Defense Department into the Offense and Defense Department. Offense is an attack, obviously, but including some of those rules from the NFL, if you attack a nation without being provoked, that is encroachment. And the penalty for that should be your line of scrimmage, therefore your nation's boundaries get pushed back a little bit. That would be a great deterrent to nations that try to take more lands from around them. Now, something else that we should remember there with the NFL is that the offense and the defense, defense begins at the nation's borders. And it doesn't do any good to have an offense if you don't have a good defense. If you can't keep other nations outside of your nation, then pretty soon you can't complain when your nation's standards have given way to anarchy. So let's think about all these things with what's going on with America. What are we fighting for? See, the whole thing with pride, national pride, is that it's always taught as such a good thing, but pride is also, should be remembered, it's one of the 7 deadly sins. So if you live in a free nation, you should be grateful for it, because none of us are the ones that made this nation free. But a lot of people, I feel, hate freedom. People who don't use freedom resent freedom, and they hate freedom. We saw with the pandemic how quick so many people were to just give their freedom up. And that's a scary thing, because it means that people might not always vote for freedom. That's why it's important to have the inalienable rights that we have in this American thing. So without being proud of America, a person can be a serious and devout patriot to the concepts and precepts that this nation was built upon. So where do we stand in this globalization thing? It seems to me that what the world might want of America is another China. Because yes, if it came down to it, to compete against China in the workplace, I do feel America could give them a run for their money. Even with their disciplined armies of workers and their tyrannical rule of communism, I think that the American system of freedom in our factories could possibly defeat them. But let's also remember that labor unions at the time and labor fighters, that when labor unions began, they began as groups of workers on that particular job site, not as the businesses that they've grown to be, with some of them having become corrupt. But laborers fought for a 40-hour work week with one parent working should be able to provide a nice, comfortable life for their family. Now look at what we've got. We've got 2 parents usually working and working more than 40 hours a week to try and have the things that they want. So we really got to think about all these things with whether it's worth it to spend billions of dollars to fund a war in the Ukraine when we've lost so many things here at home